Recently, I've been taking a second look at my lens options. I'm on an APS-C camera and my entire range is between 18 millimeters and 50 millimeters, which is most likely due to my Sigma 18 to 50 being permanently glued to my camera. I have some manual primes as well, but these are more for fun and character than anything else. And that's been totally fine. My 18 to 50 is sharp enough that I can really just crop in if I ever need some extra magnification, and I'm on an X-T50, so I have 40 megapixels to spare. Lately, however, I've really been craving that telephoto look, that compression in the image itself that you can't really get from just digitally cropping in. It's a property of the lens itself. It's a property of that focal range that I don't really have access to. It may not surprise you to learn that I typically don't shoot wider than 25 millimeters, so that sensation of always wanting to zoom in more and more and more is really one of my driving factors for staying glued to the equivalent of 75 millimeters on a full frame camera or 50 millimeters on an APS-C camera. The telephoto look to me just feels so enticing. The ability to just reach out and almost touch the subject of your image in such a way that, I don't know, I think it's just so hard to replicate with cropping. Even again with a decently sharp lens like this and even with megapixels to spare. It's not something you can just replicate digitally. You need the glass to actually achieve it. Also, I hadn't shot birds in a really long time, and that made me kind of sad. So off I went. I'm on Facebook Marketplace, I'm checking used sections, you know how I work, like I'm not buying new, but I'm going to be looking for those used, high quality secondhand glass, and I very quickly realized something, which is that even in the used sections, even in Facebook Marketplace, telephotos are so expensive. I had sort of always tangentially known this, but seeing it like face to face and like actually understanding just how much those higher focal lengths will actually cost you, even again on an APS-C sensor, was definitely eye-opening to say the least. For context, all of the lenses I've ever used on every single camera I've ever used have typically been between 16 millimeters to 50 millimeters. I very rarely ever range beyond that, just in terms of stuff that I'm gonna buy for myself. I am also just addicted to 50 millimeters. I very rarely venture out from that. It's kind of where I'm comfortable at. 50 to 75 is kind of like my dream sort of FOV. The longest lens I had ever used up until this point was my Panasonic 12 to 60 on my Panasonic G9. Rest in peace. I should never have sold you. I am so sorry. Which was basically the equivalent of like an 18 to 90 versus my 18 to 50. But again, I can crop. I can just digitally crop. I can have about a 2x crop on my 40 megapixel camera compared to my 20 megapixel G9, and I'd basically have not quite the same image quality, but close enough to where I feel okay with the image at the end of the day. Really not that big of a jump for me to step to 90 millimeters. And I think that's kind of why I didn't really gravitate towards the 12 to 60 when I had it back in the day. Now, another really important thing to remember is that I don't want to spend a ton of money on this. Realistically, I don't really use telephotos for the type of work I do. I work really close up, I do BTS on sets, I'm trying to get really up close and personal. And you know, while I don't typically shoot very wide, I need that versatility. So realistically, having, you know, a telephoto on set isn't going to help me at all. And that's not really the work that I typically do. So with all that sort of put together, I'm looking for something pretty decently budget. I need it to be fairly lightweight because again, my camera being an X-T50 is also kind of small and I don't really want to overbalance it. And you know, I want decent image quality. It doesn't have to be the best thing in the world. Because again, it's not going to be for pro work, but I do want it to be decently sharp and, you know, performant. So let's see what my options are. Now, the first one that anyone's ever really going to recommend to you is going to be the 70 to 300 Fujifilm lens. I mean, I think it's an amazing lens. It's super light. It's extremely sharp. You know, you're getting wonderfully silent, quick autofocus, which is awesome for a telephoto. What else? Oh, incredibly close-up focusing range, so you can almost use it like a macro lens, which is great if you want to do like close-ups, all that kind of stuff. Maybe you're trying to shoot like flowers or like insects. I love doing that kind of stuff, so that's super cool. And you can have all that for the low price of 949 Canadian dollars. If you've been handling cameras for a while, it's really easy to get desensitized to pricing. You know, it's $500 here, $1,000 there, $3,000 here. You know, all these things start to add up because you're looking at online sources of strangers yapping to each other about how good of a deal something is or how bad of a deal something is. Oh, you know, I'm getting pro work with this thing, so it's good. Or, you know, I'm getting the best bird pictures I've ever got in my entire life. You cannot conflate what is worth a certain amount of money to a stranger with what is worth that amount of money to you. You know, $949, I mean, like, it's not the end of the world, but that's a lot of dates I could be taking on my girlfriend this month. You know, that's a lot of money that I could be spending maybe on my family, to splurge on them, you know, to show them, you know, hey, I appreciate that. That's a lot of money I could be spending on like myself in terms of things that I'll actually use and maybe further my career with, you know, all these kinds of things that you really got to account for in terms of deciding, is this just sort of like an impulse purchase? Is this worth $1,000? And, you know, are these bird pictures that I'm going to get worth $1,000? Maybe. I don't know. They could be to you, but personally, no, not really to me. I don't need all those features. So let's keep going. Next up on the block, we have the Fuji 55-200, which is also, by all accounts, really, really good. Now, it is a little bit older, which can be a downside if you plan to crop extensively, since the glass was not really designed for such high resolution cameras. But in my opinion, that's actually less of a problem than people say it is. And I think that realistically, cropping past 200 millimeters anyway is, you know, you're stepping into the area of like, you want a super telephoto, you know? It's been tested like to hell and back, so you have all of that technical data online. And that's kind of the nice thing about it being an older lens. You have all those reviews. Everyone's basically used it. You get some cool stuff too. You know, you get the aperture ring, you get the stabilization on-off switch, you get the all-metal construction. It is, by all accounts, despite being slightly older, still a very nice lens. Now, it is sold for $1,000, or at least it was. But the nice thing is, typically nowadays, it's much, much cheaper, even new. And I do see a lot of people selling theirs online as well used. I've seen it go for anywhere from $485 to $600 Canadian, but this will depend regionally. Don't take my word as gospel here. But what I will say is that I have seen it go for about half as much as the 70-300. Meanwhile, I will say the 70-300 actually does hold its value significantly more in terms of the used market. I don't see much more than like $200 going off the asking price. So, you know, you got to pick your battles here and there. That extra 100 millimeters on the 70-300 is pretty nice, I'm not gonna lie. But I think if you're going for more of a general purpose telephoto that isn't too expensive, this is a great option. So, I mean, like, there it is, right? Like, you have a pretty solid, all-encompassing 50-200. That's telephoto right there. It's $500. It's half the price of the 70-300. I mean, it has all the little bells and whistles. It's a little bit older, sure, but I mean, it still works. It still performs. I mean, what more could I ask for? You know, there's this funny thing that Fuji does with their lenses. They have two lens lineups, actually. I mean, most camera companies have at least two. When it comes to their lenses, they have like the casual version and they have like the pro versions. So you have the XF, which is sort of the more premium version, and every single lens I've talked about today is an XF lens or probably a third-party lens in the case of the Sigma. And those are great. I mean, they're wonderful lenses. They're awesome. They always have, like, you know, better build quality. They usually have like aperture rings. Sometimes they're weather sealed. All the ones that have come out like in the past decade have been weather sealed. You know, you get a little better lens coatings, I think. I don't know. They're just better, right? The last lens on this list has none of those things. It is an XC lens. XC is sort of like their budget, lightweight, but still performant lens lineup. And you may be thinking, that's weird. That's exactly what he was kind of bringing up in the beginning of the video. He wanted a budget, lightweight, but still a decently performant telephoto lens. Now, there's a funny thing about this lens. It's really barely mentioned online at this point. It's basically been eclipsed by its newer, more expensive siblings in pretty much every way, and it's only really brought up as a comparison point for those two lenses. It's also my pick for my telephoto lens. This is the XC 50-230 Fuji 9 lens. Does it reach as far as the 70-300? No, but it reaches farther than the 50-200. It's not weather sealed, but it does have stabilization. The autofocus is pretty slow, but it's not slow enough that it's ever gotten in the way of one of my shots. It's not the sharpest, but it's pretty sharp. It has a fairly high variable aperture, at least in terms of the minimums. It's I believe it's a 4.5 to 6.7, I think. Yeah, 4.5 to 6.7, which is a little bit higher than the other two lenses. But again, I'm usually stopping down. I'm usually shooting in daylight anyway. I'm not shooting super high, fast action sports, none of that stuff. I just need reach. I'm shooting landscapes, I'm shooting birds, I'm shooting wildlife. There is no aperture ring or switch on the lens, but again, I am used to that. I think actually most of my lenses do not have aperture rings on them. It's stabilized, it has pretty okay autofocus, and again, considering it's a Fujifilm camera, these things don't have great autofocus in the first place. Don't go here if you want good autofocus. And it's actually really, really lightweight. I have to say, yes, it is made of plastic. Yes, it has a plastic lens mount, but it weighs like nothing for what it is. I think it's really hard to get a 50-230 with this little weight. There is basically no mass in this thing. Obviously, if you're going to be zooming, it definitely alters the balance of the camera a little bit, but I'm not shooting video with this thing. It's not a big deal. I just need reach. And if it comes to just needing reach, if you just need that, you can get this thing for about $200. That is not a joke. I got this for $200. And I know you may be saying, hey, maybe you should have just splurged for like the 50-200. And like, maybe that's the case. But to be honest with you, I like XC lenses. I've always liked them. I know people complain about the plastic lens mounts. They complain about the construction. They don't have the aperture rings. My first Fuji lens was an XC35 f2, which is like, I can't believe I sold that damn thing. I'm gonna be honest with you, because it was so fun. It was one of my favorite lenses ever. And I've used a lot of lenses at this point. You know, it was lightweight. You're still getting that XF, you know, like level of image quality. The autofocus was plenty fast. I was shooting on an XT1, so I didn't exactly have like freedom to crop, but it was very, very sharp. I loved that thing. And I think that people kind of ignore the lower lens lineups because they think, oh no, I need the premium side of things. I need that. Why? Well, what if I do something in the future? Like, realistically, I don't want to diss you, but like, I don't think you should be investing in that sort of thing unless you have the skill set to back it up. And if you're trying to learn how to use a telephoto, I recommend going on the cheaper side first. Don't invest in something that you barely even know. I mean, there was a real risk here when I bought this lens that I wasn't even gonna like the telephoto range. But what I had realized is that I had a significant gap in my lineup in what I wanted to be able to achieve artistically, and I needed something with that capability. I don't regret buying this cheap of a lens. I think it's a wonderful piece of kit, and I think that it's super underrated, especially in 2026. So yeah, I mean, look, if you're not shooting action, if you're not shooting sports, then if you're not shooting nighttime, pick up this guy. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you. Sorry for not posting more. You've heard my excuses like 50 million times, so I'm just not going to repeat them, but life has been really busy lately, so I'm trying to fit everything together. In terms of future videos, I want to talk about my XT50. Many of you may have remembered that I have a giant video about dissing this thing before I bought it, and I think it's really funny that I ended up loving it so much. So, you know, there you go. And I also want to talk about my video camera, which I've had for a very long time, and I have a love-hate relationship with this thing, and I've kind of entered a little bit of a renaissance with it. I'll give you a hint. It is Sony's cheapest video camera, and I mean like a video camera, not just like a camera that has video in it. Like, this is a video centric device, and I kind of want to talk about maybe why you should get it or maybe why you shouldn't. All right, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.